The essential characteristic that lets any company survive for 100 plus years is adaptability.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Alex Morrison, the president of Gray West. Alex, it's great to have you.
Morning.
Tell us a little bit about Gray Group and your unique value proposition in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, Gray's been around for a long time, over 100 years. So if you think about the beginning, 100 years ago, what did the advertising and marketing landscape even look like? It was certainly pre-TV. And so what I like to say when people ask about Gray's value in today's world is the essential characteristic that lets any company survive for 100 plus years is adaptability, is the ability to change through different eras, through different media. What we help our clients do is navigate that change and reach consumers in a way that's highly culturally relevant in today's world. So obviously the channels look different today than they did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 50 years ago. But our essential value is helping marketers connect with consumers and drive consideration and purchase for the things that they sell.
You've been the head of Gray West now for a bit, where are you placing your bets? Where are you, sort of investing, and what's been a driver of your growth over the last 2 years?
Well, a big focus for us has been really kind of an inward focus on creating the right kind of culture and the right kind of team structure to be very agile and adaptable to different types of assignments. Our industry has shifted more towards project-based assignments, that those can take many different forms. And so I wanted to make sure that we were building a team that was all A players. There wasn't a need for lots of different hierarchy. We often say leaner, meaner, senior, right? And clients want to meet the people who are going to be doing their work, and that's nothing new. But what we see now is that the pitch is not necessarily a discrete phase. You're constantly proving value to every client that you interact with. And I think that's a good thing. We can structure ourselves in this very nimble entrepreneurial way, and we still have the global network of Gray to draw on for some of those specialties. So if we need really the top-notch expert in a particular field or specialty, we can draw on that person and focus our efforts on having the right kind of creative firepower that's going to serve our local clients.
How has instilling that kind of new culture help you attract the type of talent that you're looking for?
When people come in and they realize that this is a place not just to do their work and launch campaigns and products and services and these kinds of things, but to really help build a new way, not just for Gray, but potentially for our industry with the work that we're trying to do, I think the ambition level is the most important thing. Almost the first criteria is that ambition, that energy, that optimism. And then, of course, you need to have amazing credentials and creative background and all these kinds of things. But without the first one, we're not really a fit. So it's really emphasizing, I guess is the short way to say it, emphasizing all of those other skills that don't show up in a book, in a resume, as primary. And saying those are the things that are going to make us great. And yeah, table stakes is you need to have an amazing book and you need to know what you're doing. But if we can be choosy in that way and really make sure everybody meets both of those criteria, that's what we're trying to do.
You have a lot of experience on the content side of the business. In fact, that's how you came up. Tell us a little bit about the evolution that you've seen on that side of the business, and what's actually working today, and what makes great content.
The precondition for any content marketing needs to be a really strong brand and a really strong idea that governs anything that you do. If there isn't an idea that ties everything together, or a strategy that ties everything together, it's going to feel like a lot of bits and bops, But when you can piece everything back together and say, oh, I see the whole story there. It actually, I received it in little 6-second bursts, or a blog post here, a long form video there, but when I actually assemble the vase again, I see what they were saying. They just didn't tell it to me in one bite. People don't really care whether you shot it in your basement or whether you spent $1 million on it. Is it great, right? And I think there can be a number of examples where people spent literally $0 on a production, and it wound up becoming massively successful. And there are a number of examples where they spent $0 and it was a huge failure. So it's not, I think that's where creative sensibility and understanding what's going to really work is so important. Because it doesn't mean it has to be expensive. It just means it has to be thoughtful and put together in a compelling way.
We were talking about the funnel earlier, and awareness, all the way on through to purchase, and then there's sort of brand advocacy after that, right? With consumers and customers. It seems that more and more authenticity is kind of, winning the day. With especially younger generations, they want to see actual, customers in ads. They want to see actual customers in social and things like that. Have we gotten completely away from the age of the sort of celebrity endorser for brands?
Yeah.
Or are there still a number of brands where that still works?
It's interesting because on the one hand, authenticity is really, really important. And I think there's a number of dimensions that you could talk about authenticity. Seeing real people might be one. But I think there's a deeper authenticity that's probably even more important, which is, are you behaving in a way that's consistent with your stated values? Does your behavior match your values? And if a brand does that, and they put a celebrity in their ad or their whatever, I think that's not a problem at all. In fact, I think in some ways, celebrities seem to have more cut-through power than ever. And I can think of any number of examples where a brand might stick their neck out a little bit and say, this is what we believe. And where they get dinged usually is if that's not how they've been. Honestly, I think people are smarter than to think that looks like a real person, so therefore it's real. I don't think that people actually buy that. I think influencers have amazing power right now. But I think the topic of authenticity is deeper than whether you're showing real people in communications. It has to do with, are we being true to what we said we were going to do?
Do you think, more and more brands are sort of building little mini agencies within them, but do you think that, to your point about values, do you think that sometimes an outside agency is actually better to make that call as to whether a celebrity or an endorser or an influencer actually aligns with those values better than somebody who's working in-house and maybe is a little bit too close to it?
I think there are advantages in some cases. Some roles, some groups, it does make sense to perhaps have those in-house if you can hire the right talent to do it. Historically, that was always the problem, is it was difficult to hire really top-notch creative talent to work in-house at a brand. I don't think the in-house trend is going to go away anytime soon, but I also don't think agencies are going away anytime soon. And the reason for that is because I think there is still an essential value to otherness, right? Not reporting to the CEO, not reporting and being beholden to what can often amount to very conservative decisions when everybody's aligned in an organization. The reason you bring in an outside consultant or an agency is to challenge those previously held beliefs and to also hold up a mirror and say, this is how the world sees you. And as long as the agency is wired to collaborate as well as to confront when it's appropriate, then I think it can be a really nice partnership where you're working arm in arm, but you're also challenging one another respectfully. And so I think that's the best dynamic right now, is when certain roles are in-house, but there's still a critical role, to your point, for agencies to bring that outside perspective.
We're hearing more and more about voice these days, Alexa and Google Home and on and on and on. And in many cases, that's sort of becoming the face of a brand. How are you thinking about branding in kind of a voice world?
Well, it's funny because for a lot of years we've talked about brand voice, and now it's literally here, right? And so obviously it's a bit of a mediated experience, mostly because that voice is the voice of Alexa, or it's the voice of Siri, or Google, or whomever. But I still think some of the fundamentals of developing a brand voice apply. Forget the literal voice for a second. How should that entity be communicating and adding value to consumers, I think is a really important question, where it's kind of similar to when we first started really thinking about interactivity in marketing and how do you design for two-way interactions. I think it's much the same here, whether it's literally a voice conversation, a chat bot, It's how would this brand voice that we've all talked about on paper start to manifest if you were able to talk with it, whether typing or speaking. I think it's less important that the voice is not literally a branded voice, and more that the interaction feels like a branded experience.
Where do you think we are on the sort of virtual reality adoption cycle? What kind of cool work have you seen that's been done in that area?
I continue to think that virtual reality has amazing promise.
Right.
But I feel like it's always at that stage. I think it's still at that stage where there's something about putting the headset on is not a mass behavior yet.
Yeah.
So no matter how cool the experiences get, until we figure out the form factor that makes it appealing to a mass audience, I think it's going to be challenged to really break through to that next level. And it's weird, like even with, I've seen applications that were more like beauty or fashion oriented, like a runway show or these kinds of things. And you'll see women like literally not wanting to put it on because
Right.
it just messes with, it's like completely the opposite of the cosmetics world, right? So anyway, I think it's an amazing, it's such an amazing space, and I'm really excited by what VR can do. But as far as mass application, I think I'm a lot more excited about mixed reality and AR.
We talked a little bit about values. I wanted to ask you about purpose. More and more brands are getting, a lot more, I would say, almost surgical about their purpose, which is good, but it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because there is the potential to risk, losing some customers over the whole thing. Do you think it's okay in this day and age now for brands to sort of sit on the sidelines and actually not wade into things? Or how would you counsel one of your accounts to kind of think about this?
Every brand is different. If every brand stood up and made a big purpose statement, I think that trend would end pretty fast. So it's not like, at a certain point, you either stand for it or you don't. And if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, invest behind a brand purpose, if you look at Nike or Gillette, which was actually us, those brands stuck their neck out and they were willing to have some shoes burned or be the subject of a Fox News segment 1 or 10 times, right? And if you look at a Gillette, I think it was a very brave move that brand made to stand up to toxic masculinity and say that, yes, we are the best a man can get, but let's look in the mirror and make sure that we're really living up to that. I would not advise a client to get into it if they don't have the stomach for it, especially if they're going to make a big statement. And I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of, quote, sitting on the sidelines, as you said, if you don't want to wade into the full, force of what that conversation could become. How do we make sure people are buying more than just what we're selling? They're buying into what we're selling and who we are. And I think that becomes a really important conversation for any brand that's in a highly competitive category. And you have to at least have that conversation.
We're living in what's maybe the golden age of television. Better shows than existed 30 years ago, richer storylines, the whole bit. It's incredible, and yet paradoxically, more and more people are thinking about cord cutting and sort of new ways of consuming media. What comes after TV?
The content creators have never been the ones running the cable companies or selling the ads, right? So we've seen for 60 years or so a very close coupling of content and commerce delivered through 30-second pods and all this kind of stuff. So that's been the marketplace for brands to engage with. To me, TV is sort of an abstract concept at this point, right? Yes, there is the thing on my wall, but the delivery of the content into that, it's really just a screen on my wall. Now it's storytelling, it's content that, sure, some of it's 30 minutes, some of it's 60 minutes, some of it's serialized, some of it's not. And TV is just a handy word because we all know kind of what it means. But we've already moved past, I think, in many ways, the traditional definition of TV. So I think we're there. Like, we've already moved past TV.
Alex, one of the questions we love asking is a book that you'd like to recommend to our viewers.
I really love the new Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. I just think it's a great sentiment, right? And he's got a lot of really great nuggets in there around the qualities of great leadership. He's looking at really what makes people, what motivates people, and how can a leader become a leader that people look to and trust and want to follow into the fire. And I think the answer that he proposes is, well, you got to lead into the fire. You got to lead from the front.
Right. Thank you, Alex. That was Alex Morrison, the president of Gray West.